All right, Craig Dostie here with the review of the new TX Pro, the long-awaited, much-anticipated new telemark boot from Scarpa. I'm showing the women's version here because I was hoping it was a little bit softer than the men's. I skied them side by side. Couldn't tell any difference. But before we talk about the flex, let's talk about all the new features in this new telemark boot. The number one thing that everyone's been looking forward to is an AT caliber walk mode with a real simple walk mode lever, and it does yield a really wide range of motion. Cuff rocks way back. I haven't done a precise measurement, but trust me, it's more than adequate. The other thing, though, that's really nice is it has low flex resistance. So not only does it go backwards quite a ways, but it goes back and forth with less resistance than any of the current line, well, the late current line of TX boots. Some things are pretty standard. Like on the cuff buckle, there is a touring tooth so that it's fairly loose, and you can loosen it up and then not have the wire dangling about. Okay, the power strap is reminiscent of aftermarket power straps. It hooks on, and then it's got two ribs and elasticized, and it cinches down nice and solid. Scarpa went back to their old toothed ratcheting instep buckle, and something that's not so apparent on first look, but I did notice it in using it. These ribs here at the elbow of the tongue, I think they positioned them better than with the old TXs, and because I found with the old TXs, these wires wanted to either be above or below, kind of depending upon your foot shape. But these tend to line up right in the middle and easily, automatically. The other thing is, this instep buckle can be easily replaced. It's not tied to the cuff rivet. It's a separate bolt, and I believe that is a T20 or T15 head. So it's pretty easy to pop that out, get a new one, and replace it if you need to. The forward buckle is on top, which I think makes it easier to latch down if you're really cinching it hard. But the other benefit is not on the side where it can get damaged if you're scrambling in rocks or when skiing, especially when there's hidden objects underneath that you kind of scrape by. And the bellows protector is not welded to the tongue. It too is easily replaceable. That has an Allen head. I'm guessing that's about a 4 millimeter. So, and the toe. The toe is really nicely sculpted. You can see that there. And the reason it's sculpted, it just makes it easier to see where the inserts are when you're putting it into a 2-pin NTN binding. Because it's always kind of a problem when you're trying to line up the boot. Now, where are those doggone things? They're hidden from your view from the top down, but with that sculpting, it makes it pretty easy to figure out where they're at. Oh, and the bellows. The bellows are wider, and I'm guessing that the bellows are wider to basically widen the flex zone around the bellows, which this boot needs as much help as it can get in that regard. Another subtle thing, the second heel, the gap on the second heel is deeper, and that makes it easier when you've got snow in there for the claw to grab onto the second heel with an NTN binding. So those are all some pretty awesome improvements to the new TX Pro for 2025 and beyond. So is there anything negative I can say? Well, of course. I'm Dostie. I always got something negative to say. Oh, you know what? No. Let's talk about the fit. So the overall size of this shell relative to the old series TX is shorter. My TX is 299 millimeters long for boot sole length. This is the same size 26, Mondo size 26, but the boot sole length is 290 millimeters, so 9 millimeters shorter. So does that mean it's 9 millimeters shorter inside? I don't think so. It might be a couple millimeters shorter. I honestly don't know. What I do know is with my TX, my shell fit is a 2-finger, 1 3/4 fit. With this, it's definitely a 1.5 finger fit. So I would say we've lost 2 to 3 millimeters in overall length on the inside of the shell. And for most of you, no big deal. For some of you, that might be a problem. Sorry, okay? Overall, the fit I thought was very good. It was difficult to get into this, not impossible, but I really had to push to get in until I had molded the liner. Once I molded the liner, I found that the toe zone was easily, I didn't measure it, but it felt easily as wide as my TX's, which is a 101 millimeter last. So my guess is this is a 101, maybe a 100, okay? But it's definitely more snug in the instep zone. So for those of you with a high instep, that might be problematic. For those of you average to low, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I have a very low instep. If you've got an average to slightly above average, for sure you're going to need to mold this thing, all right? The liner, I would say overall, is thinner. That probably makes it a little bit lighter weight, saves some weight. And it's tongued. And the back, this zone in here is a softer foam, so that is part of what contributes to a lower flex resistance when you are in tour mode. Okay, so let's talk about the flex. Overall, first impressions are this is a really stiff telemark boot. The common comment that I heard from other reviewers who've skied this boot was the bellows was too soft and or the cuff is too stiff. And putting those two together, what I would say is, out of the box anyway, this is kind of unbalanced. The bellows is too soft for how stiff the back of the boot is. And I don't think it's just the cuff that is so stiff, it's that the scaffo behind the bellows in combination with a really solidly locked cuff, and probably a fairly stiff cuff at that, is gives a lot of leverage to flex the bellows. So the bellows flexes pretty easily, but nothing else seems to flex. And so my sense is I got a tippy toe sensation when I was telemarking with this, which I did not like. All the pressure was forward of my metatarsals. And personally, I don't feel like I'm telemarking with full control unless I'm driving my weight through the ball of my foot, through my metatarsals, which actually are located a little bit behind the bellows. And for me to do that, in my experience, I need a softer flexing overall boot. In fact, I ski in walk mode. But there's hope in this regard. I thought it was too stiff, but not everyone will think that. Some people are going to love it. One of the reviewers that I spoke to He skis in TX comps. He's very familiar with the feel of that boot. And I've skied TX comps myself, and even prior to this, I thought the TX comp was too stiff and was forced me to ski tippy toe. And but this is even stiffer. Okay, now he said it reminded him of his TX comps, and so he was confident, hopefully, that this will soften in time. I'm not so sure, because I think you'll notice in the back there's a rib here, and then all this area in here is matte finish and this is glossy. Well, I think the matte finish indicates that there's carbon in there, and I think Scarpa did that. This is speculation on my part, but it's educated speculation, because in order to save as much weight as they could, one, they shrunk the boot. All right, that gets rid of some volume. But I also think they probably made the scafo thinner. But if they made it thin enough to save weight, it probably would have been so thin that the back here just would have buckled and bent. All right, so they had to stiffen it up. And so hopefully it will soften in time. If this softens, then there'll be a little bit of give and you have a little bit more round flex to the sole, because let's face it, the sole of telemark comes from the sole of the boot. I mean, it's also the sole and the heart of the telemarker, but we can't telemark without proper equipment, right? So, will it soften in time? Hopefully, maybe. My guess is it will, but it will take longer than any prior version of NTN compatible telemark boot. There's another option too. I did ski this in walk mode just to see if I could. And it turns out when I did that, okay, I was actually able to get weight on the ball of my foot, because I was able to flex my leg forward enough that I could bend at the ankle, that the pressure kind of translated back on the boot. But in this walk mode is so loose that, of course, I felt like I was skiing in tennis shoes almost. Not quite, but you get the point. It was too loose to ski in walk mode. So people who like a soft flex like I do are going to want some kind of way to make this more progressive. So that either you got to wait till it breaks in, or I suspect the solution is going to be to replace this lock lever with something that has a spring mechanism in here. And Phantom snowboard boots already include or have that as an option, a spring-loaded lock lever. And Bobby Tuso did a little bit of sleuthing online and found out that Scarpa has a patent for the very same sort of thing. So maybe that's coming in a future version of this boot, whereby we've got all these great touring advantages and improvements in the buckles, and we'll be able to get, if you will, kind of an adjustable dial-in progressive flexing cuff. And but for those of you who like TX comps, who like stiff boots, you're going to love this. For those of you who want a softer flexing boot, you're going to have to wait till the next gen, or take a chance that it's going to break down in a reasonable amount of time, and you're going to love it. Okay? So that's my report. I'm sticking to it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk at you next time. Remember, if we want to spread telemark, we got to telemark so that everyone sees telemark and goes, ooh, that's cool. I want to do that too.